All right, Joe, we are back on the podcast where we are training men in spiritual fitness. And Joe, there's a question I like to ask guys who I talk to maybe for their first time when they're contacting cross training ministries, interested in training in spiritual fitness, interested in learning more about how to get this lifestyle of putting Christ first. The first question I usually ask guys, it's a simple question, but it for some reason is stumping a lot of guys and is a big roadblock in them moving forward. And here's the question: where do you go to church? That's a simple question, right, Joe? It's not complicated. But the first question I like to ask guys that are interested in maybe taking on a spiritual growth challenge is, where do you go to church? And Joe, you'd be amazed at the number of guys who say, you know what, I'm interested in spiritual growth, but I don't really go to church. You see that as well?
I do because I'm a pastor and they're not present most of the time. You talk to men and the way they talk about church, if they're there 1 out of 4 weeks, you think they're there every week. And I know these things are getting worse, but yeah, a lot of guys, for some reason, they want to cut around this. They want maybe growth, but they don't want to have to go to church and be a part of a church to actually grow. And it just
Mm.
doesn't work. It just is a failing recipe.
Yeah, I am a bit confused as to why because we've been saying this for years, right? You go to any church for any amount of time, you're going to hear, "Hey guys, go to church. You need to be, attending church regularly." Yet guys don't do this, and that's not just like, "Hey, men aren't going to church," which statistically we can see that's true. Men aren't going to church. Christian guys are not going to church as often as maybe they have in the past, and just aren't going to church in the way that I believe we're being called to in obedience to Christ to do. This issue of, we're talking, according to what church you go to, 1 maybe 4 hours a week is a huge hurdle for a lot of Christian guys. And in your experience, what are some of the things that are getting in guys' ways of saying, I'll go to church, I'll commit to regularly attending a church?
Yeah, I think part of it is Sunday morning. It's the quiet time of the week. Now there's a lot of stuff going on Saturdays, so you got that honeydew list, that list
Mm-hmm.
of things you got to get done. And if you're going to be able to watch the games that are on Sunday afternoon, when's the moment you can get your yard work done or your house projects done? And it's often Sunday morning, or it's coaching. Little league teams and sports teams. I mean, there are these kind of other things that fill in that gap, and it's just really easy to fall out of the habit. And once you fall out of the habit, for whatever reason, it's difficult to then make it a habit later on in your life.
Yeah, the truth is that, pastors don't want to hear is that there is a lot of good things getting in the way of guys going to church. Now, what we would often say at cross training is there's often a good that's getting in the way of the better. Like, I think the better
Right.
thing, the best thing is still going to church, but there are a number of guys that maybe are skipping church to stay at home and be lazy. But I think a lot of guys are just wrapped up in other things, extracurricular activities, coaching, whatever. But I don't know. I think we got to complicate it even more, because another thing pastors don't want to hear really is that guys are skipping and not going to church because, Joe, it's just kind of boring sometimes. It's not all the sermon's not that great. The
Yeah.
music is pretty terrible. There's some legitimate reasons for a lot of guys to say, I don't know, was that really even worth my time? I don't even feel like I was changed.
Yeah. Now this is a little bit too close for comfort, Evan, right now, because again, this is a pastor speaking. But if we're honest, often I think we overpromise in terms of the short-term effect. So the
Mm,
way we talk about church is, it's going to rock your world, and you're going to come out and you're going to be a different person. If you miss it somehow, you're going to be starved all week. It's not necessarily people's experience. They go
mm,
in, they come out. There's really no felt difference. Often, like you said, the sermon, if anything, it was difficult to follow. It lacked
mm,
application. It made the text even more difficult to understand, not more easy to understand, or even what was the text that the person was
mm.
supposed to be talking about. The worship, was done by amateur musicians. All of these things. The people are awkward. They're difficult. It can feel like a chore, if we're honest,
Mm.
to actually go to church.
Mm.
And so, guys, they need that convincing that, well, if that's the case, if I'm not feeling like it's making a difference, if in many ways the community's hard to be a part of, why should I show up? And I think some guys don't have a good answer to that question.
All right, so I'm hoping you do have a good answer for us, Joe, because that's the thing. I think outlined some good reasons why guys maybe not going to church. But you do have a list here of 6 reasons why guys need to make a habit of going to church. Because I do think it needs to be. Look, we're here to talk about spiritual fitness training. You cannot train in spiritual fitness without that regular church attendance. We believe there's no way of getting around that, even if you are in a small town with a small church where the pastor is really mediocre. I still think that there's you have to be connected to a local body of believers. And so, all right, give us 6 reasons why then guys need to understand that the church habit, it's got to be regular.
I'm going to run through these pretty quick because really, I think what we want to get to is to help guys figure out how to maximize the benefit of showing up. But for that guy, let's say that you're that guy out there and you just need someone to nudge you forward. Here are 6 reasons why, guys should make a habit of going to church. And number 1 is it's just an act of obedience to Christ. You go to Hebrews 10, 24, 25, do not forsake the assembling of believers. That this is something that we do as Christians on the Lord's Day, first day of the week. We show up with other Christians and we acknowledge his lordship. So number 1, it's simply an act of obedience. Number 2 is that being a Christian, it's not just a personal walk with the Lord. Guys that have read the New Testament, they know that Paul speaks of the church as a body, and that's a really important metaphor, that we're knit together like ligaments or muscles and organs together. And so, we're actually dependent upon other people. So how do you show that dependence? Well, partly you show up and you gather with them and acknowledge it's not just about me, that there's an us that's involved, and that's the body of Christ. Number 3, we are what we love. And so you've got to ask the question, if you're doing something in place of this, what that says is that you love that more than Jesus. That means you have an idol. So if you want to remove that idol from your life, put Jesus first, and that means showing up to worship him on Sunday morning. Number 4 is I'm going to use a term some guys may not know, but a means of grace. So theologians talk about corporate worship, worshiping with other believers as a means of grace. This is one of the channels by which God gives us strength. So if you're looking for strength to fight against sin, if you're looking for strength to love and be patient, with people around you, if you're looking for wisdom for your life to share with others, church is one of those places, one of those means by which God is going to give you grace. And so you show up and he's going to give you strength for your week. Number 5, church isn't just about a Sunday morning gathering. It's about a community. And so actually, this is about more than just going to church. It's about you sharing your gifting with that community, and that life being more than just a single event, but really becoming a part of a community that you're surrounded by. And then here's the last one. Number 6 is that, going to church, it sets the thermostat spiritually, not just for yourself, but for your whole family. There are a lot of statistics at this point that indicate if a dad takes his kids to church, there's a much higher percentage that those kids are going to continue to walk with the Lord in the future. And so it's not just about you, it's about the whole thermostat for your family. And you set that thermostat for the week by whether or not you show up on a Sunday morning.
That's good. Those are helpful. And no offense meant at all. I've heard them all before, right? These are good. These are great reasons, Joe, that I have heard many times as to why men need to be going to church. Hopefully guys didn't hear any surprises in there like that those are all legit, clear reasons. So I want to press you forward a little bit there, because I've heard from the pulpit, pastors say, go to church. You need to be, going to church. I read it in my Bible. I see that. I don't know that anybody's ever told me how to go to church in a way that's actually beneficial as a man who's training. You kind of think about, we talk about training and spiritual fitness. Think about even just training for your body and, you're doing physical training. There's a way, everybody knows, go to the gym. Like you could tell somebody, okay, well, good job. You went to the gym. Now what? So I think you need to give guys the now what. Now that you're at the gym, what do you do to actually maximize the benefits of the gym? So I don't know, what tips do you have for guys, and how should they go to church to maximize its actual usefulness?
Yeah. And let's go back to that image of maybe a small town here in Scotland, we'd say a village church, not a dynamic community, not a dynamic pastor or minister. how do you actually enter into that kind of worship setting in such a way that you're really going to benefit? And here's the first thing I would say to guys is don't sit in the back and rush out immediately.
Hmm.
If you think back to being in school, we all know which kids tried to always sit in the very back, right? They're not the ones that were really studious. They're the ones that didn't want to pay attention. They wanted no one to see them, so they didn't have to feel like they were being accountable to learn anything. And a lot of guys, we do that. We show up a little bit late. We sit as far back as we possibly can. And then we make sure we get out before anybody has a chance to even talk to us. And that is a setting where we're not going to learn. And so the first thing that guys need to do is they actually need to try to be present.
Yeah.
Bump up toward the front. Put yourself in a position where you feel like, you're surrounded by the people. Stick around afterwards. Shake some hands. Meet some new faces. All of that's going to change your experience if you're not just somebody who's coming in and sailing out before anybody sees you.
Yeah, being present is definitely something that you're not going to get any benefits out of this unless you're actually showing up, wanting to be there, wanting to be a part, wanting to actually take in what you're learning. Along some of those same lines, I like to tell guys, I think there's two things that I'll say here that sound contradictory, but go with me. One, I tell guys sometimes, look, you don't need to go to church. Actually, there's a deeper issue here. You need to be captivated by Christ. Men that go to church are those who are captivated by Christ, want to hear his word, want to sing songs to him. All right. So there's a deeper issue there. You need to be captivated by Christ. On the other hand, I would say if you're not currently captivated by Christ, what's a good way to kind of get a kickstart there? Why don't you rub shoulders with people that are captivated by Christ? Why don't you go to a building in your community where there are people that are excited to sing songs, excited to learn from God? That can be a kickstart for you as a guy. How do you go to church and actually maximize the benefit? Get next to some people that are actually captivated in the way that you want to be, and you'll see that people can rub off on you in that way.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, if you want to really get excited about a sports team, you go tailgate with some people.
Yeah, that's right.
And you meet those fans, and all of a sudden you start to care more about, whatever the team is.
Yeah.
And again, sit next to the people who are excited to be in church, who see the value of it. And like you said, that's gonna rub off. And that I think leads into another thing that I'd say to guys who want to maximize the benefit of church. And this is going to scare guys. It's going to scare especially guys in the U.S. So, Evan, now it's your turn to be put in the hot seat.
Oh, no.
And this is that guys, they have to actually get over their cowardice, and they actually have to sing. Now, I know, it's different where I'm in Scotland and a lot of our churches, but, I grew up in the U.S. U.S. has all the band. They've got the worship leader. And it's all set up so the guy in the seat doesn't actually have to sing. Now, one of the things men need to realize is guys in the past, they've not been ashamed of singing. Like if you look at, sailors, they used to sing as they worked on ships. If you look at like U.S. Marines as they're marching, they'll have chants. They're raising their voices. We've got to go into church and actually recognize we've got a king, and it's worth singing his name out loud. And if you begin to actually sing along and be a part of the praise, that begins to touch your heart. So, if you're passive, if you're scared to raise your voice, expect yourself to not really engage the singing element of worship. If you begin to be one of those guys that actually is, really sounding out the praise of Jesus, it's going to affect your heart.
Yeah, that is convicting. And Joe, there's for most men here in America, I'll say, there's no scarier thought than doing that. Like, all right, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to sing. And then like the power goes out or something, and it's just your voice that you hear. Also, like I think that terrifies most men, that I may be heard. It's okay if like the band's really loud this Sunday and maybe nobody's going to hear me and maybe I'll go for it. But to be heard singing, I don't know. It is an embarrassing thought for a lot of guys. And it shouldn't be. What else are we doing there if we're not going to just shout out praise in some sense? So I can see how that can maximize the benefit. Actually sing, not just sit there. I'm not gonna lie, you're asking a lot there, Joe. It's one thing to show up. It's another thing to actually participate and to sing. I will say, man, it would sound a lot better if all the guys in my church sang. I'd be for that.
Yeah, I tell you, it's one of the special things I think over here is guys are more willing to often sing, and you
Mm,
can get 10 or 12 guys in a room, and man, they can fill it. And so this is a little
mm,
bit of a challenge to these American guys: learn how
yeah,
to sing and
yeah,
become singers.
yeah.
Now
That's
let's
good.
let's take up one of the most difficult elements of a worship service, and this is the moment when the pastor prays.
Ooh.
And especially a lot of services, there's maybe one prayer where he goes on a little bit longer,
Mm.
and what we all do is we just check out, right? Immediately. Oh, it's the prayer moment. This is when I can think about what I'm going to do after the service. And so,
Stop talking about me, Joe. All right.
yeah. So here's what I would tell guys. I'll give them an image to think about. Again, the more you can engage your mind, the more you're going to be involved in the worship. And so when somebody is praying at the front, I want you to think about those moments where somebody tells you to follow them. Like you're in a car separate from their car. You have no clue where they're going. And they're like, follow me.
Hmm.
Immediately you get a mindset like, I'm going to stick on this car's bumper.
Hmm.
And, it doesn't matter if the light is red, you go straight through it because you don't want to lose them. And you try to stay with that car that's in front of you. And what I would encourage guys to think of when somebody is praying, try to follow with that same mindset. You might get lost, 30 seconds or a minute in, but treat it like a challenge. How long can I engage my heart and mind and be a part of what this person is saying? Because what's happening in that moment is there might be 100 or 200 people in the room, all focused on one prayer need. That's a powerful thought.
Uh,
Everybody lifting the same need before the throne of grace. And
mm.
so try to follow that prayer and be a part of it, and to view yourself with that person who's praying before the throne of God, laying whatever it is before his feet.
I really like that. That's a powerful image that you bring there of like a whole crowd of people circled around and focused on this one prayer need, this one thing. Because I think that does get to the root of some of the issue that arise with guys being at church. We a lot of times are we're personally present, but we're corporately absent. So
Yeah.
maybe we're in it there for ourselves, but corporately we're just not even there for the people around us in the same way. And yeah, the picture you just painted is there is no corporate absence. You are in this as a body of believers together, and yeah, that's a beautiful picture to me.
Yeah. And it'll be a challenge. I'll be honest. I think following that kind of prayer is difficult, but it's worth trying to be more
Yeah,
invested in.
yeah.
Well, here's something else. And okay, so I see this all the time because I'm preaching from the front, and maybe it's a tricky passage, and you say, "Hey, look at your Bible. Look at verse 20." And a bunch of guys, their eyes are straight up because they don't have a Bible with them. And so I want to tell guys not one but two things. The first one is make sure you have a Bible.
Mm.
The second thing is make sure it's not a digital Bible. And
Oh,
the reason why, I'm going to say the reason why is because you know yourself, and midway through the sermon, when nobody's looking, you get off the Bible app and you pull up something else to look at. So take away that distraction, get a physical Bible. And what I want guys to think about is, the point is not what the pastor is saying. The point is ultimately to listen and to understand the word of God itself. And
mm.
so what's meant to be happening is he's describing something, but you want to be able to see it in God's word itself.
Yeah.
And just as it would be ridiculous if you went into a museum and you were taking a guided tour and somebody was talking about something from the past, maybe it's like William Wallace's sword,
Mm.
and they're describing this broadsword, but you shut your eyes and you never actually look at the artifact itself. I mean, that would be a foolish thing to do. That's what we do, though, when we're just listening to the pastor and we never look down to see what is actually in God's word. And so bring a Bible and open it up and look at it as you listen to a sermon.
Wow. Yeah, that's convicting because it is just so easy to show up with my phone and look at my phone for the Bible passage of the day. But I think there is something to, yeah, if I don't see the actual artifact there itself, and also just the benefit of being able to open it up later, right? I think part of what we would say how to maximize the benefit here is that it carries over whatever happened there in that service should carry over to
Yeah.
the following week. So whether it be discussions with your family or whether it be just your own personal revisiting of what God was speaking during during that sermon, to be able to open your Bible and maybe even have made a marking or something like that. There is some value to that. There's a revisiting of that museum that you can do personally there in your own time.
Yeah. Well, so if we're going to keep going on this thread, so let's go back to the honest truth. So you're listening to a sermon, and you're listening to someone like me. Okay, so there's a reason I've never been invited to the TED stage, and most other pastors, because we're not good at giving talks that are easy to follow, right? We create labyrinths of thought that you get lost in. So how do you listen to a sermon that honestly is not put together very well, but in such a way that you can benefit from it? And what I would encourage guys is to develop the habit or the skill of active listening with sermons. And this means asking questions. Why are you telling me this? What are the implications of this from my life? How is this related to the passage? The more you're asking questions, the more curious you're going to be. The more curious you are, the more interested you're going to be. You're going to pay more attention, but you're also then going to be looking for ways to take what you're listening to and apply it into your life. And that's going to be of benefit for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, active listening, it's a game changer for guys that are participating and actually want to maximize on the benefits of a Sunday service. I'll say, just even uniquely to the context I'm in at my church, we do something super weird that actually throws a lot of people off, and that's just detracted some people from coming to our church if they visit. But we gather at round tables. We meet in borrowed space, so we don't have pews or anything. But we all sit at these round tables, and after the sermon, we always have a 5 to 10 minute amount of time where you're supposed to take what you just heard and now talk about it around your table. And let me tell you, that'll put some pressure on a dude, because you do not want to be the guy that after the sermon has to look at the person across the table from you and say, yeah, I wasn't listening. I don't know. I don't know what just happened the past 30 minutes. I don't know. I spaced out for 30 minutes. Like, that's super embarrassing to be the guy that showed up and actually didn't maximize on the benefit of being there. And man, it is. You look, I could say it can be one of those moments of, oh man, I better next Sunday come prepared to actually listen and be able to respond and say, oh, here is what was said, and here's how it impacted me. Here's what I feel like I need to do this week. And guys, so I would say, man, if you're looking for a way to maximize on the benefit of the Sunday sermon, have that conversation after church. Maybe you don't have that time built into the service, but on your drive home, can you repeat to your wife and kids, hey, here's what was taught this Sunday. Here's what I learned. Here's what I'm going to do this week to respond to this. Because if you can't, you haven't maximized on the benefits of being there at church. You didn't actually actively listen and take that in. So find a way to use that in conversation in some sense, whether it be immediately or in the following week, I would say is a great follow-up.
Yeah. And I would encourage guys, it's so easy to be the critic, to sit back and, if you actually did talk about the sermon, to talk about what you thought he got wrong, or, what was theologically, not accurate. Yeah. Don't be that person. Be the person that doesn't matter. There will be something in that sermon, because if it just referred to a passage of the Bible, there'll be something in that passage of the Bible. So you scrape around, you find something nourishing, talk about that with your wife, with your kids in the car. And like you said, let that become something that's it's a weekly habit. As we leave the church and as we drive home, we don't just turn the radio on to see what we've missed of the sports match or the game. We actually take up the sermon and find something that we can talk about together.
I think more broadly, one of the things guys need to get used to is seeing Sunday mornings as a time of practice. And what I mean by that, like, how do you maximize a Sunday? See it as a way to practice the Christian life. A lot of guys get hung up on, man, I don't know how to evangelize. I don't know how to talk to lost people about Christ. Well, you know what Sunday morning is? It's an opportunity for you to gather and talk with people about Christ. Now, granted, they're church people. That's a safe place you get to practice those conversations. You get to say, here's what I think, here's what I believe, here's some questions I have. It's a great mode of practice that will carry you through. Same thing with prayer. Church is a great place to pray, and it's expected. You're going to show up, you're going to listen to the pastor's prayer. Maybe you're going to be asked to pray during your Sunday school or whatever. this is your opportunity to practice those disciplines that you need to be carrying out throughout the week, right? But you need that Sunday often is a launching point. It's a time for us to refocus, regather, and launch us out into the disciplines that need to be carried out throughout the week. But we just need those reminders during the week.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, one last thing that I would say to guys is if they really want to maximize the benefit of church, don't make Sunday morning, that hour of worship, the be all end all of your church involvement. Because the truth is the church is a lot more than a single service. I mean, it's really important. Don't miss that.
Yeah.
But actually, become somebody that volunteers. If you want to grow, I mean, honestly, I see it again and again. It's the men that say volunteer to teach a Sunday school class, adult or for children. And those guys end up studying before they get to church to prepare a lesson. I mean, or the guys that, get involved with some sort of midweek service project, and they build relationships with other Christian men and find themselves, meeting at Starbucks another morning of the week for additional, support. So, make yourself embedded in the community itself. And again, that means that when you show up, it's not just about that sermon that may or may not be the most inspiring thing you've ever heard. It's about the whole community. It's about all the people that you're invested in and care about. And that's going to really help your motivation as well.
Yeah. If guys will start to see Sunday morning as a time of equipping that sends them out to then lead them into living that Christian life, that lifestyle that we're talking about, it will be helpful. Because in other words, if you position yourself to where you have to teach a Bible study of some sort during the week, whether it be on your lunch break at work with some guys that are spiritually curious, or whether it be with a group of guys at your church that you're training in spiritual fitness with, or, a small group or Sunday school class, whatever your context is. If that's a regular thing for you expected, and you're expected to show up prepared for that, you actually really need Sunday. You really need that Sunday morning. It becomes integral, a part of your life that you have to sustain and equip you and be ready to go. And so how do you maximize on Sunday mornings? Your Christian life has to be more than Sunday mornings, ultimately, is what we're saying. You have to have a lifestyle that's built outside of just that and be leading. And look, that's part of what we as cross training want to do, is help guys to lead other men in training in spiritual fitness. And these kind of men are the guys that go to church, that participate, that are present, that volunteer. And that's what's going to drive you then to lead the other men around you in spiritual friendship and, bodily discipline, simple routines, all the things that we talk about. So any closing thoughts, I guess, that you have around this idea of go to church? I feel like we just said everything every other pastor's ever said. Go to church, guys. But hopefully you've heard in this, like, you gotta maximize, not just go to church, but go to it in a way that's actually going to sustain you and bring something new to you. There's a way in which you can be present that will, inspire you to go again next week.
Yeah, I would leave it with guys. I think you referred to it earlier, but picture yourself as one thing to go to a gym. You can go into a gym and walk out of a gym and have done nothing. You can go into a gym and go through a bunch of motions and still get very little out of it. Yeah. You can walk into a gym and think, I'm going to engage this workout. Some of it's going to be difficult, but I'm going to engage it fully. And that's a whole different experience. Picture you go into church. Now it's time. Are you going to fully engage it? It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to follow the prayer. It's going to be hard to lift your voice. It's going to be hard to take notes maybe in the sermon. But if you fully engage it, what would be the benefit when you walk out? If you have that kind of mentality, that it's a little bit of a workout, but I want to be fully present, like you said, and do it all wholeheartedly, you're going to have a different outcome. And I think you'll start to see yourself grow.
That's it. All right, guys. So you know what you need to do this week. It's easy. Go to church, be present, maximize on the benefits of being there, and see the growth that comes as part of this. I know you have other things to do on Sunday. I know you can go play golf. I know you can catch up on your honey-do list. I know there's a lot of go to church, be there, be the kind of guy that's leading your family through worship, rub shoulders with other people that are captivated by Christ. And y'all join us again next week. We're going to continue talking about spiritual fitness training.